Hi, welcome back. This is Victor Counted, the author of Bonding with God, and every other time we kind of look at bonding with God, and so this I've had my students read the book as part of the assignment, and they discuss the book, and in the process of doing that, I wanted to take the opportunity as well to get them to reflect on the book, and in doing that, generate some questions and maybe have discussions around topics related to the book. And one of the things I wanted to do also in doing that is that I could kind of respond and reflect on some of the questions they've discussed and share that with you, with hope that kind of helps you in your own journey as you are reading this book and making sense of some of the questions that come up. Another question that comes up that was asked during one of the group discussions with my students is, think about the religious environment you grew up. It leave room for you to ask hard questions and grow, or did it produce compliance without connection? That's a very interesting question. And so, just for context, I get the students to generate these questions themselves for their group discussions. They do have main questions that they can engage with, but also they are free to kind of come up with questions themselves that they want to discuss in the context of the chapter that they are reading. So thinking about the religious environment that one grew up, and how whether or not it left a room for them to ask hard questions as they grow, whether it kind of produced compliance without connection. That's a very technical question. And as I'm reading the response that the students had, and they did mention that they had had a very fascinating exchange about the authoritarian versus overly pessimistic religious environment. And so in some sense, what you find is that an authoritarian environment, social environment, can leave a person with a very little room for genuine relational growth, ultimately, especially with God, where the focus is so much on rules without necessarily relationship. And some people grow up in those kind of household where everything has to go by a particular kind of rule, and especially if you have a parent that is very much authoritarian in their approach to parenting, that can also shape, I guess, how you view your faith or view God or have a relationship with God. But on the other hand, an overly pessimistic social environment can leave someone without the relational scaffolding that is needed to actually form a stable faith identity. So the point is that both of them can be extreme, but you find a better sense of framing or relational identity in the middle, because on one hand, if you grew up in an authoritarian household, most likely you might perhaps it could also impact the way you see God, that everything has to be rule-based without relationship. Even when you are in a church context or in a religious community, you are one of the people that believe in the doctrines. It has to be the doctrines. And you find that there are people like that. Everything has to be doctrine, which is important, but at the expense of having relationship with people that are within those communities. On the other hand, when the social environment that one grows up when it's pessimistic, it can leave someone without really a relational scaffolding that might be needed to form healthy, stable faith identity, because it means that you are not really putting your foot down when you need to. And so I think that both extremes can definitely disrupt the bonding experience that we might have with God. And I think this is what chapter 2 does. It kind of invites us to ask a very important question, like, what particular soil was I planted in, and how has it really shaped the roots of my faith? Now, it's one thing to talk about, I talk about this all the time, the fig tree in the Bible. Maybe the reason why it didn't bear fruit was because it was planted in a wrong soil. And so many of us are planted in a wrong social environment, I don't want to say in a wrong family, because nothing is a coincidence, are planted in the wrong places, which really impact how we see God, how we see ourselves, and how we see people around us. And if this is you that I'm talking about, I would encourage you there's some practical steps in my book, Bonding with God, which I think can help you to sort of make sense of what is happening, at least have that awareness. And definitely, once you're aware of what is happening, of how your social environment either makes you to take a rule-based approach to religion or faith, and also hinders you from forming a healthy faith identity, that awareness in itself can become the first step to really experiencing healing and really making sense of who you are in God. This is Victor Counted, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye for now.